You mentioned Les Mimsy, and I had the very rare privilege of being able to read the original screenplay before they went and messed it all up.
Wow.
And remember, this is a guy who's written some movies that have been so influential, like Contact, and I can tell you that the original version of Les Mimsy is way more badass than what they turned it into. And it was incredible because it's almost a horror movie in the original version.
Really?
And what's happening, yeah, because these kids are basically turning into some kind of new type of human being. And it's a lot more visible. They're like, you know, their faces are changing, their bodies are changing, and their telekinesis and their powers get more and more intense as the movie goes on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's scary. It's like the family doesn't know what's happening to their kids and whether their kids are going to be okay. And then this payoff ending is so huge. But then what happens is whoever did the rewrite took like all of the psychic powers that the kids developed over the course of the movie and give the kids all those powers in the first 15 minutes. Then the kids don't get, there's nothing really that scary about it. And then they added in this whole weird thing that wasn't originally in there about people from the future needing our genetic material in order to keep themselves going. That was not part of the original screenplay.
Oh, really?
So this is an example of where I think whoever bought the movie had a predetermined agenda of what kind of information they wanted to have come across, and they found a script that was close, and then they just sort of modified it to their needs. They made it more kid-friendly, and they added this whole element that was not in the original story at all.
Did you see Jupiter Ascending?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was, and I think we might have talked about this because, again, I mean, at the top of the list of people that are seemingly trying to send us some smoke signals are the Wachowskis. And yep. I liked Cloud Atlas. I didn't mind Cloud Atlas the way a lot of people didn't like it. I actually saw it multiple times in the theater. But Jupiter Ascending was awful. I mean, from top to bottom, I couldn't believe it. And I wanted to sort of, not just cinematically, but where did they fall off on because initially, when I see the trailer, I'm like, holy mackerel, look what they're talking about. They're talking about, sort of advanced beings beyond this planet having deeds to Earth, owning the herd, so to speak, talking about, and I'm like, holy wow, they're giving up a lot of the, let's say the Anunnaki or whatever the sort of your theory would be on the idea of genetic modification, etc. And then you get to the movie, and not only does it barely goes down that road in any significant way, but the movie's terrible. What was your takeaway?
Well, again, we're dealing with a worldwide cult that is putting out propaganda through movies. They have almost unlimited funding because they can print dollars out of thin air in the Federal Reserve. So it's a very big adjustment curve for people. It's going to be very upsetting. There's going to be a great sadness and a great shock among people once we get disclosure. Everybody thinks disclosure is going to be amazing. There's going to be some really upsetting things we're going to learn, and folks like you and me are helping people who are going to be able to help others adjust to this new reality as this stuff comes out. Because, look, it's a simple fact that there has been an organized group of people who actually believe that Lucifer is the good guy and that Christianity is misguided, and they're still angry at Christians. I just watched a movie the other night called Kingsmen.
I just saw. I mean, this is outrageous. I just saw it.
Whacks a whole entire Christian church full of people, does a mass murder while they're playing rock and roll music and acting like it's funny.
I just saw the movie 2 days ago, David, which is crazy because it's been out for 3 months, and I didn't think when I saw the trailer it was anything special. Then a friend of mine that's kind of on this wavelength was like, "No, you got to see it. They're talking about brain implants. They're talking about all this other crazy stuff." And sure enough, I went and saw it. I was blown away.
It's an encyclopedia of the Illuminati. That film is you should actually, like, once there's Illuminati studies departments in colleges after this whole thing comes out in the open, people are going to go back, and it will be your assignment, your final exam is to write a term paper on how many Illuminati things he managed to squeeze into that movie. It's unbelievable. And some of the ones people miss is, notice at the beginning you got Michael Caine, the leader of the Kingsmen. Notice the bottle of whiskey or brandy that he's got, and notice that it is in the shape of the Masonic pyramid or Masonic triangle. And then at the end, they drink from that bottle, and it's a very, very key scene because it turns out that the bottle has a lethal. Well, I shouldn't give that away, but
but I mean,
the bottle is.
Yeah.
So they. Oh my gosh, you're right. Everybody gets a SIM card, right? Everybody gets a SIM card where they have free internet and free telephone. But then it turns out that the SIM card can allow them to remote control people, and there is all kinds of open talk about depopulation.
Yes, that's the other
movie.
Yes.
And what they do at the end is they actually show President Obama's head blowing up, along with all the other world leaders, which is another one of their things. They are very much against the conventional elected governments. They have a very sardonic view of them as sort of like the fall guys for their plan. So it just that alone was so subversive, showing all these world leaders' heads blowing up at the end of the movie,
but
making it a big joke,
and quite overt though in the talk about. The person, because again, I'm a big fan of people talking more about collectivism. I know Paul Hillier and I disagreed on that, in that I think you and I are a little more aligned on the fact that it isn't as easy as just there's some evil, sort of Mr. Burns, Count Chocula type guys in a room that are like, ha 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 ha. Everybody kind of believes they're doing what's, the most noble or the best thing, and therefore the end justifies the means. And in the case of the depopulation crowd, they absolutely believe, justifiably in their opinion, that the human species is a virus and the only way to save the planet. So it's always very difficult and complex. It's not as easy as bad or good. We're going to talk to David a little bit about that on our last segment. It is What in the World, Sirius XM Canada Talks, channel 167. You're seeing the same thing as I am, the ISIS stuff, the Russia stuff. It seems like they're ramping up a new Cold War. They're really ramping up the stuff. Where do you sit on the sort of where that plan sits, and what are you expecting over the next year, 18 months?
I am expecting that everything that we think we know is going to be completely rewritten in the face of new information. I have had the distinct honor and privilege of speaking to insiders, in many cases fighting hard to find these people. And from these insiders, I've learned that since the late 1930s, beginning with Nazi Germany, we have built bases on other worlds like the Moon and Mars in our solar system, and that was significantly expanded beginning in the 1950s and thereon. Our government, if you want to call it that, which is really the military-industrial complex, has widespread relations with a whole bunch of different ETs. We have technology that is so vastly ahead of what's out there in the mainstream that when that technology comes into our hands, it's literally going to put us right in the front seat of any of the greatest sci-fi movies we've seen. All the stuff that you see in the sci-fi movies is technology we already have right now. Many of the ETs you see in sci-fi movies are based on people who are really out there, including Jupiter Ascending and the reptile guys that were in there and all that stuff. So they don't have wings, actually. That was one distortion, but they look very similar. So there's a lot of stuff. I mean, it's very interesting to me because it's going to be gradual, and it has been gradual for a long time, but it's not going to stay gradual. There's going to have to be a point where the whole thing breaks apart and where there's a big tsunami of data that comes our way. And I have been in contact now through this insider, Corey Good, with this alliance that is actually defeating the bad guys, both in space and here on Earth, because there's a war going on in space as well. Good guys versus bad guys. It's the same stuff. So what we're seeing is a geopolitical battle taking place on Earth that is reaching its apex. And again, similar to a coup in a third world country, you don't really see the coup until it happens. There's a few little signposts that something's going on, but nobody really gets it until the event takes place and the existing regime is overthrown. It seems like the regime that's being overthrown in this case is the international banking cartels and how they've been systematically raping the public. It's not so much an elected government as it is a systemic change. But there will be a point where this whole thing is going to break down. I mean, it was just announced, and it was on the front page of Huffington Post in the last week, 261, I think I'm getting the number right, it's somewhere around that, 261 top public officials in Great Britain were pedophiles.
Yeah.
That is a precursor. If you're reading the tea leaves, that's leading up to something.
Guardian has really pushed that story as well in the UK, which surprised me.
Yeah, and I was reading comments of Americans reading this article, and they know there's a story there. They're like, what in the heck is going on here? The average person is not going to go seek out children for sexual gratification. There's something going on here. There's something we're not hearing. So they're figuring it out. They're putting it together. And, you know, you got to look at all these different clues, and people don't want to do this because they don't want to be labeled as crazy. They don't want social stigma. They don't want to face the fear. But the bad guys have said that if we are not willing to look at what's going on, then we deserve to be their slaves.